The NFL season continues, and that means that we are in week 4. Well, we should be in week 3, but we didn't do week 3. So we're here for week 4, though. So let's jump right into it. We've got a great matchup on Thursday. We've got the Cowboys taking on the Giants at Giants. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, look for fantasies. Cowboys run defense has been a joke. No, and Devin Singletary is having a pretty decent season. He's about top 20 for running backs. Definitely a must play in this one. Malik Neighbors is on some crazy record pace to get like more than 200 targets. So where you maybe don't want to start Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors is definitely start too there for the Giants. For the Cowboys, this is going to be, this will be a closer game. This will probably be like a 27-24 game. Dak is definitely starter, and CD. Jake Ferguson has been top 10. He's been putting up decent numbers, and that's about it for this game. I think it's going to be a fairly mid-scoring game.
I think the Cowboys really have something to prove this game. They've been playing terribly these past 2 weeks and lost some bad games. So I think
they have something to prove. It's whether they prove it.
Next up, we got the cannon in Bo Nix taking on the gunslinging Aaron Rodgers. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you could see the point spread was as high as 8 in this, and it got fought down to 7. I think that most people see the Jets walking away. I don't see any starters really here yet for the Broncos. I think you're starting to see a nice Jets team. Rodgers going into a starting place right now, probably moving with another good week. He'll move into the top 15 this week in overall stats for quarterbacks. I think he'll have a good game in this one. Breece Hall, definite starter. Garrett Wilson is a starter, but there's still some communication issues with him and Rodgers in this game. I'm not sure. Like Conklin's kind of a mid starter. He's not, if you have one of the obvious top 10 tight ends, Conklin can have his good game here and there. He's not a breaker at all in terms of speed, but Rodgers has been looking for him. And what he'll do is he'll start developing, his most confident relationships. And I could tell you, he's not confident in Garrett Wilson with the way you can see the way he's throwing him the ball. It seems like they're still having miscommunications. Yeah, I think Rodgers looks a lot healthier than Kirk Cousins for sure. Rodgers, you see, is moving, was able to roll out of the pocket a little bit. Cousins looks like a statue.
Yeah, I think Rodgers definitely heard the people talking about him not moving, so he decided to move a little bit that game. I doubt we'll see as much movement.
That did happen, actually. It's funny.
Who do you have winning that game?
Oh, I mean, Jets are going to roll. I think Jets by 10 is probably a good pick.
And then he didn't ask you on the game before, Jets or Cowboys, Giants. Who are you thinking there?
I think Dallas is going to do enough in that game to win, even though it's at, New York. I just don't think I'm not a big fan of, their offense. Their offense is not very good in New York. I think, a team like, the Cowboys against Jones, I think that's too much for him. And I think, Malik Neighbors will have a pretty good game, but he's pretty much all the offense right now. But I do think Singletary probably has his best game of the year because running backs have eaten up and done very well against the Cowboys.
All right. Following the shootout in New York, we have the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Packers at Lambeau. I think I just saw the report that Jordan Love might start. He felt comfortable last week and wanted to, but they didn't let him. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great matchup. I think the Packers, with the way that Willis has played, I don't think they're in a rush to start Jordan Love, but it looks like in this big divisional game with Minnesota up 3-0 right now, a game ahead of the Packers, I don't think it's a rush really to get Jordan Love back, but it does appear that he's going to start. And I am a firm believer that getting Love back on the field is better for his confidence than it becomes, because I don't want it to become for Love. Well, you can see Willis can play in this offense too. So really, was it Jordan Love or was it just the offensive talent? So, Love coming back, I think, is a definite start in your fantasy league, though you're going to probably have to check up into game time on this one. He might be a late game announcement. Sam Darnold's been amazing. I think their offenses look great. You have capable players and Aaron Jones coming over from the Packers, and Jefferson's had some really big games. Those are definite starts for me. The Packers still are a little bit more confusing in terms of what's going on in the running game. Jacobs has been solid in some games, but Daniel Wilson's been playing a lot as well. And I think Jacobs is still a little bit dinged up. He's got a little bit of a back injury. Jaden Reed's definitely developed into the number one. And I think you're seeing a lot of platooning going on with Kraft and Musgrave, not definitive plays if you have one of the top starting guys.
All right. And where are we thinking who's winning this game?
I think it's a close game, but I think Packers 34-27.
All right. After that duel in Green Bay, we've got a big one. We've got the Saints taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins doesn't look bad. He doesn't move, but he can throw the ball.
It doesn't look great though. I'll tell you, the New Orleans defense has been really strong, and I'd be very reluctant to play Kirk Cousins, this one who looks like literally a bronze statue right now. If he has protection and their line has not been great, he has good games. But if you look at last week, they were pretty much dominated up front, and they did okay. But if the line had given him more protection, they would have had a much better game. And I think he's just not able to move it or evade anything. Bijan Robinson in this game, they're iffy starters. He's had a pretty good year, but he's an iffy starter. I'd put him in, you're going to start him because he's one of your starters, but he's not like an awesome play this week. Drake London's been very strong, and I think Kyle Pitts is a starter here. But I think that New Orleans defense has been fearsome so far, and I think they're going to give a lot of trouble to Cousins in this one. Yeah, I definitely think Derek Carr's been great so far. He had a couple plays last week that reminded people of the old Derek Carr. Kamara has been back to his greatest form ever, which is maybe 4 or 5 years back. Kamara looks exceptional, and I think Olave, those are starters in this one.
All right. So do you think Atlanta's covering the 2.5?
In this game, I think no, Atlanta. I'd take the Saints in this one.
Following the two old guys, the two shootouts, the two Cowboys, we've got a young one. We got the Rams taking on the Bears in Chicago. Caleb Williams, I think, had his first all right week last week. It was kind of garbage time, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think again the problem for the Rams is injuries all over the place, really. And all the wide receivers here are backups. You're missing Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. That really hurts into Stafford's production overall. I do think Stafford here is kind of a borderline play. Right now trending towards the back half of quarterbacks, not because of his greatness, just because he's lacking talent. He does have DeMarcus Robinson, who's made some plays, and Tutu Atwell, but they're really struggling offensively because they don't have their main guys. Kyren Williams is a must play in this matchup for sure. In terms of the Bears, I think this is going to be a low scoring defensive game. The Bears defense has been the best part of their team. The offense has struggled mightily. The offensive line is terrible, and Caleb Williams has been under a lot of pressure. And I honestly think he's they're not doing a good service to him in terms of, coaching and giving him plays he can win with. And I think you could see that so far in the offense. The offense has not been great, although Caleb Williams has had some plays, has also made a lot of bad throws. In this one, I think it's going to be a game right down to the wire. I think you're having like a 17-20, 17 or 17-14 game here. DeAndre Swift has not been good. I think he has 50 or 60 rushing yards total down the season. Has not been good. I'd put him as a borderline starter only if you must. But Caleb Williams, I'd say DJ Moore in this one because wide receivers, I should say the defensive backs of Rams have given up some big plays. Duzne got his first touchdown last week, which resulted in the Bears having to take a timeout, which was absolutely ridiculous in terms of the team. But I'd say I'd start DJ Moore only on Nunze in deeper leagues.
All right, good to know. So I think you're taking the under on the 41.5. Do you think the Bears are covering the 2.5?
I actually think the Bears are going to eke this one out just because I think the Rams, they scraped that game out against the 49ers. That was in dire shape. And I think the Bears at home get a much needed win, trying to save their coach who is on the hot seat. He's got to be one of the top hot seat coaches right now.
Let's talk about a coach that's been in the driver's seat for a long time now. We've got the Steelers taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The Steelers lead the league going 3-0. Only a couple of teams doing that so far.
Yeah, but really you have to look at who they played, and in terms of their defense, they're only allowing 8 points a game. The Steelers defense has been one of the best in football. It always is. But their points they're getting, it's not dramatically amazing on offense, but I would say Justin Fields has looked better. He's not a starter for me. Najee Harris is a starter. Pickens is a borderline starter, and so is Freiermuth. I am not impressed really with Justin Fields as everyone else is. Indianapolis, in terms of their offense, they're doing pretty much. It's really just as Jonathan Taylor goes, and Jonathan Taylor's a must start. But it will be a tough climb against the Steelers' run defense, which has been very strong throughout the year. Wide receivers, there's no one here really who's developed into a top threat for Richardson. And Richardson at times looked like a backup. He looks like a high school quarterback at times with his reads and the throws he's making. Only starter here for Indianapolis for sure is Jonathan Taylor.
All right, you're not picking Fields up in your league. Well, do you think the 39.5 is going to go over or under?
I think that number is so tight, I wouldn't bet it. I definitely am going to take the Steelers in this one. Indianapolis is not the quarterback play is look, Richardson really only had 1 year at Florida. People forget that. And he was out most of last year. So what is he? He's still kind of a rookie. And I think the Steelers are going to be in his face all day, like Green Bay was, and they are going to give him a lot of trouble. I think this game, I'd take the Steelers, but I'd stay away from that over under number. It's very close.
All right, following the Pittsburgh Colts game, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who embarrassed them last year in prime time playoff fashion. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I mean, I think that's a big part of the story. I think Tampa Bay, I don't know. This Phillies team, even though they're 2-1, it seems like, their coach is still on the hot seat because it just makes a lot of questionable calls. But I do like a lot of the offensive players here. I think this is going to be a very high scoring game, 34-27, 34-31. I'm going to take the Eagles. Saquon Barkley's been MVP. I mean, he's the number one fantasy player right now in every fantasy league. Jalen Hurts has been strong as well. In terms of the wide receivers, they still have some injuries, so you're going to have to check. Goddard has been great at tight end. But, with Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, question marks, you have to go and check in on those players. But I do think the Eagles offense has enough talent. And I think Saquon has really been driving this team. In terms of Tampa Bay, Baker has been top 15. So it really depends on if you're relying on him to start. Rashad White has been strong. Bucky Irving, look for Bucky Irving to kind of take a bigger role from White as the season goes on. He is actually playing really well. He's the backup running back to White. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin must starters here. The offense looks pretty good. I think a fairly high scoring game in this one. And I would take the Eagles to win.
All right, so we got the over 44.5 and the Eagles covering the 2 points.
Yep.
All right, following the old rematch from last year's playoffs, we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Andy Dalton-led Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton's going to take on his old team at home. What are your thoughts on this one? I mean, Dalton looked great last week.
The red rifle back playing against his old team. I think. Look, you want to give Andy Dalton credit. He played a great game, but I also want to, talk about how much the Raiders head coach was so irritated with his team, saying they made business decisions and weren't playing. So I think definitely I would go and I would default back to Andy Dalton's normal play, not what he did last week. So I wouldn't be starting on my fantasy leagues. I definitely think this is a get right game for Cincinnati. I think you saw that how good the Cincinnati offense was last week. Joe Burrow was pretty pissed off. I think at the end of the game, you saw him like rallying with the defensive coach, being like, hey, what the hell is going on with our defense? Because, Cincinnati's defense could not stop anything last week in another great performance where the offense did a pretty good job, but couldn't stop Washington at all. I think you're going to see Cincinnati. This one is to me, this is a good, in terms of a bet, because Carolina, I think, had a falsie. And I think Cincinnati's been kind of underrated. I think this is a great, perfect lineup for a good betting game. And I would take Cincy minus 3.5. But I would say start your regular guys for Cincy. Joe Burrow, Zach Moss has been pretty good. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both had really good games. Andreas Savis, the third wide receiver, is interesting in deeper leagues. And Mike Gesicki, I'd start all those Bengals this week.
All right. Do we think we're going over the 47.5? Or are we going under?
Yeah,
that?
I think 34. I think this is going to be like 34-17, something around there.
All right. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the C.J. Stroud Texans. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I mean, Trevor Lawrence looks crappy. There's no other way to say it. He hasn't looked good. He's made bad throws. The offense looks terrible. You have to start Etienne if you have him because he's still a frontline running back. But the rest of these guys, I would stay away from. C.J. Stroud, of course, load these guys up. This is a weird game because it seems like, hey, on paper, you look at it and like Jacksonville's going to get blown out, right? But the NFL has a weird way of making things right somehow in terms of the way teams will respond when people like coaches. I mean, Doug Peterson's job's probably on the line if they don't look better, and it shouldn't be because he's a good coach, but the players are not playing for him. So this game will be closer than people think. I know that 6.5, that line is an interesting line. People think, oh, that's not enough, but Houston's still a young team with young players that make mistakes in terms of like CJ Stroud being their leader. So I still think, Houston, while it's a good offense and it looks like it should just blow out Jacksonville, I think this game's going to be closer than people think. CJ Stroud definitely start. Cam Akers is a start here. Interesting start with Mixon injured. I think Akers is a guy maybe in deeper leagues. If you're looking for a second or third running back, interesting start here. Could vulture some TDs. Nico Collins, Diggs has been great, really stepping into the number one role, although he's kind of like the three. None of them have real roles that kind of switch in from X, Y, and all those different positions. And Schultz kind of has been borderline. I mean, there have been better tight ends. He's playing at a top 15 pace, but not a definitive starter right now.
All right, so we're thinking Jacksonville is going to cover the 6.5. Now over under 45.5. Too tight to bet?
It's a tough line. It's a tough line because you need participation on Jacksonville. All I'm going to say is this game will be close, but Jacksonville's offense hasn't looked good enough where I can guarantee you or kind of feel confident that they're going to participate in the point scoring.
Next up, we have the flash in a pan Arizona Cardinals taking on the Washington Commanders in Arizona. What are your thoughts on this game?
I think you get a matchup of really two great quarterbacks. I mean, if you look at the numbers that Kyler Murray's put up, he's top ranked guy in the league in terms of fantasy points. He's been big. He's put up a lot of good numbers, but the team's not exactly winning, and that's a problem for Arizona. Now Washington, they get a breath of fresh air because Jaden Daniels had the big Monday night game and he looked amazing, and he really did. And he battled against one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and Joe Burrow, and came out on top. So people want to crown this guy right away. It's just kind of a funny thing. He's a great player. He's young. You just got to remember that. But Terry McLaurin, who's been in the league for a long time, but played with a lot of crappy quarterbacks, had a huge game on Monday, and I would look to start him. It's funny. I can tell you in a fantasy league I'm in that actually has a lot of veteran players. He was available on waivers, and I picked him up. And I just laughed. And it was because I had a couple bad weeks in this league, just, going against top teams where I had like the top offenses against me in my league, and McLaurin was available. And I just thought that's kind of funny that he's available. And here's a guy now with a big time starting quarterback who looks like he has big time, throwing potential. So that's an interesting start here. Robinson's been good at running back, and Zach Ertz definitely moving into that top tier. Younger quarterbacks have a tendency to rely on their tight ends, and I think Zach Ertz has been good. Has a good potential to do better than he's even done so far this year as the offense opens up a little bit more for Daniels. Kyle Murray's been strong. Connor's strong again. Marvin Harrison's had some good games, and then disappeared for a game. So but to me, these guys are starters because they have a lot of potential. I think this is going to be a big, really fun game. One of the better games to watch. It's could be like a 34-31, like Madden shootout here. And Trey McBride, he's been good, not as good as last year when he came on really strong. He's been a little nicked up too. A lot of fantasy starters in this one though.
All right, are we thinking Arizona is going to cover the 3?
You know what? I think that line is just right. I think it's like 34-31. I think Arizona squeaks one out here because Washington, you have to remember those Monday night games shortens up the week a little bit, and then they have to travel, and they're going to go far. They're going to go all across the country. And I think these are tougher games. They don't look, it seems like it should be, but these guys get used to these schedules where they have the 6 and 7 days, to prepare. And I think that's going to be a key factor in this one. And I think this is a game I'm not going to bet, but I'm going to totally watch it. If I bet anything in this, I'd bet the over.
All right, it sounds like you have the over at 65. Is that the math I got?
Well, I'm just saying, I think this is going to be a high scoring game.
So it's clear in the 50.5. Following that shootout of those young guns, we've got another young gun in New England taking on I guess he's kind of young gun out there in San Francisco, Brock Purdy. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I wouldn't start anybody on New England. It's just that clear. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson has been okay, but that's about it. And the Patriots had clearly, when they played the Jets last week, and they're going to face another tough defense with the 49ers, who actually, the 49ers defense knows that their offense is struggling right now. So, we're going to see a good effort against a really crappy defense. I wouldn't start any of the New England Patriots this week. In terms of the Niners, I think, Purdy's dinged up. They have a lot of guys injured. Ayuk has not played well. Kittle is out. They have a lot of guys that they're missing, obviously, on offense. Purdy has had some good games. Jennings was amazing. So here's who I'd start for sure in this game. I'd probably look at Jennings and Purdy, and then Jordan Mason, who's done a really good job, replacing Christian McCaffrey, who actually was in Germany or something, looking at having people look at his Achilles tendonitis. So That is not a good sign when you're going overseas to get some kind of medical procedure or get a specialist to look at you. If there's nobody here in the United States who can take a look at it and you have to go to Germany, I don't think that's a good sign for the future of McCaffrey, to be honest.
Well, we've got
Maybe you can spread it. Maybe you can, if you have him, maybe you can spread a story out that he got good news in Germany and that and try to trade him, because to me, when you do something like this, we've seen like Kobe and a lot of the great athletes when they were first doing PRP, and I have no idea what what kind of medical kind of recommendation the doctor in Germany is. But I mean, come on, you have to go to Germany.
Well, do you think the 49ers are going to cover the 10 in this?
I think this is a good game. I would bet the 49ers. If I'm betting this game, I think 49ers, because I don't think New England's going to score much. I think it's going to be like 24-7. 49ers.
All right, so we're taking the under 2. All right, good to know. All right, after that bad injury and our trip to Germany, we've got the worst contract ever, which will send you to Germany a lot, taking on I don't know, they've got some bad contracts too, the Las Vegas Raiders. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think, it's a really kind of a sad state in Cleveland. And I think this team would be way better off if they started Jameis Winston, who's the backup. But, right now they're sticking with Deshaun Watson because they're stuck with the contract. And, Amari Cooper probably wishes he had Jameis Winston. I mean, he's been okay. You're going to start him if you have him in fantasy leagues because he's been around top 15, top 16 in most leagues. If you look at his overall points, Jerry Jeudy's a no-go. Ford in the backup. When you see maybe down the road, maybe we get Nick Chubb, this will change the offense a little bit, but nothing really exciting in terms of starters here. I'd say with the Raiders have, there's something going on with this team. I mean, it's a very, the coach, came out last week and he said, people are making business decisions. It means that people pretty much gave up during the game. And that's not what a coach wants to see. Devontae Adams, you have to start. Brock Bowers have been really great. Young tight end. Out of Georgia has been really strong so far this year, being very productive. Definitely somebody Minshew's looking at a lot. And Adams, you're going to start here. Nobody else really. Zamir White's been okay. This has not been a super productive offense so far, though. And if I had to bet this game for sure, if I was going to bet this game, I'd take the Raiders -2.
All right. Now we thinking over or under the 36.5?
This is such a low over under that I'd probably take the over. I mean, these are professional football teams, although they don't look like it sometimes.
Following that battle of contracts in the Sin City, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Chargers in LA. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Mahomes, we have the definitive guys here. Mahomes. I think Carson Steele's pretty interesting if you're in deeper leagues. He had a pretty good game last week, filling in for Pacheco. Rashee Rice is great. I think Worthy in deeper leagues is a good start. Kelsey is so frustrating this year. I can tell you, I have him in a fantasy league, and he has been crap. And he kind of made a joke on his radio show this week and said, I've been crappy or something like that. He said he has. I mean, I just wonder. Look, it's not. I don't know what's going on in their personal lives, but at this point in his career, he's a little distracted with other things. We all know that. You just have to wonder if maybe he didn't work out as hard this season in the postseason. As you get older, you have to do more, not less. And although his mental game is higher than anybody's probably at his position, that's playing right now, if he didn't do the same workout he did in the years past in the offseason, I'm not saying he didn't, but he doesn't look very good. So I just would call into question that. I'm just wondering, why does it look so poor? And people want to say, and they want to speculate and say, well, he's saving it, for when he plays. And yeah, he might have some good games where he plays a little bit harder and, maybe he's playing more team football and blocking, and he is. But I think this is a really great game because this is like old school rivalry, Chiefs, Chargers. And I think this could be the game. One of the things about the Chiefs that I would just say, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this because I think it's really interesting. People are saying, oh, the Chiefs are winning. They're winning ugly. I saw the same thing in the mid-90s with the Dallas Cowboys when they were a powerhouse. They started winning with a lot less conviction. And you know what ended up happening when they got to the key games? They couldn't pull it off. And to me, they're getting a comeuppance coming. And I'm not talking about in terms of just losing a couple of games. I'm talking about not being at that other playoff level. Because this happens a lot and you kind of phone it in. You win some games you shouldn't. And then all of a sudden you get some games where you're playing that top line competition and you can't do it. And this will be a really interesting test because I think that these are the kind of games that Harbaugh likes to stick his, chin up. When he was, the coach at Stanford, he would beat USC and with half a team. And so you're going to see a really interesting effort here. I think one of the best games of the weekend because of the Harbaugh factor. And, the defense, if they've done anything, they've secured the lines on both the defensive side and the offensive side here. They're not scoring a lot of points, but they're running the ball really well with Dobbins and Edwards, both going to have good games. The wide receivers here and Herbert, they haven't been great fantasy players. Herbert's probably bottom 20 for fantasy quarterbacks right now. Dobbins been top 22. They're kind of grounding out games. This is going to be a very defensive game, like 20-17.
We've got the Chiefs minus 7.5. What are we thinking?
I'm taking the Chargers and the points all day.
Well, it sounds like you're also taking the under on the 39.5 too. So
it's a tough over under, but I just think it's going to be a very low scoring game, and I think that's the way Harbaugh's playing it. They're going to go for possession, grind out game.
After that game in LA, we've got a game out there in Buffalo against Baltimore. In Baltimore, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a firepower game, big firepower game. Probably it's going to be a very fun Sunday night wrap-up game for Sunday with Baltimore and Buffalo, because Baltimore needs this more, but Buffalo is cruising offensively and defensively. They've been making tons of plays. So, in this, a lot of starters, you're going to start them all because I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, despite the defenses. You're going to start Jackson because, teams just have a problem with him. Derrick Henry's more of, you're going to start him, but he's more borderline for me in this game. Zay Flowers for sure start, and Mark Andrews, and likely, I think both tight ends are starts in this week. Josh Allen's been incredible. If he's not number one this year, he's number two, or he's in the top 2 or 3 of production. He's played MVP caliber football. Cook, now that this team's running, which they never did for 5 years, Cook is, he could end up being a top 5 or 10, probably a top 5 fantasy back this year. The great news of having, Diggs gone is now Shakur and Coleman are both turning into really good fantasy productive wide receivers. And Shakur is definitely turning into the number 1 target here. And then you have Dalton Kincaid, who's been super usable on a week-to-week basis in fantasy. A lot of starters in this one. I think it's a really close game. I'm going to give the nod to something weird happening and Baltimore winning by 3.
Okay, so Baltimore's covering the 2.5. What about the 46.5? Over?
Yeah, it's going to go over that.
All right, we find our way to Monday night, where we have another 2 games. We didn't do last week, but we had 2 games this week, or last week. Now we have another 2 games the following week. So first game we're starting with is going to be the Tennessee Titans taking on the Miami Dolphins.
I hate these 2 Monday night games, but I have a feeling that what happened last week is going to happen this week, where nobody wants to watch this first game and everybody's going to watch that second game, because this is not a great game, because these teams right now both have the same issues. And with no Tua in there for quarterback for the Dolphins, they don't look very good offensively. Will Levis has looked at times okay, but most of the time not good. So you really don't have any starters here. Maybe Pollard, if you need to eke out a back, Tony Pollard, that's about it. In terms of Miami, everybody here is kind of not the guys we're used to starting, because they're not playing and they're not as productive right now. In this game, I would say, Tennessee's defense is pretty good on the run. I'm not loving Achane in this game. We're not sure if Mostert's going to play. Achane, you should start because they're going to run the ball. This is going to be a close game because Tennessee can't score. Tyreek Hill, you have to start. But that's about it here in the offense. I think it's a really low scoring game, like a 20-17 game, because both teams are going to go possession and try to, grind out the clock. And Miami needs a win here. They really need a win. Tennessee, this does not look like a team that's going to compete this year. So I think definitely Miami is going to win this one. I think it's going to be a low scoring game, something like 20-17. It's right on the line. I know it's disgusting, but that's what it's going to be. And Miami, the slight edge to take this one because they're playing at home.
Well, it sounds like you've got Miami winning and then the over just barely clearing.
Yeah, that's a tough one to bet.
All right, now we get to the Monday later game. I don't know if is it the late game or
it's just 45 minutes later. I mean, I don't know why they do this. Just stagger these a little bit differently. But they both want prime time for their regions, right? So a 4:30 game that starts Pacific time is a 7:30 game in Miami, and that 5:15 game starts. That's pretty late for people on the East Coast, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, well, we've got the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Detroit Lions in Detroit, in the Motorhome City.
Motorhome City. Okay. So, look, to me, one of the things, this Detroit offense has not looked anywhere near as good as it has in the past. This is a really interesting game, right? So that you think Detroit's at home, they're favored by 3.5. I'm all day on Seattle in this one. Seattle's offense has actually looked pretty good. Detroit's offense has not looked good. If you watch the games, this is not Goff is not playing at the pace he was last year. He's only ranked top like 10. He's like 11 to 15 right now. Gibbs has been okay, but still looking for more big plays out of him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, sort of okay. Some bad games. Laporte had not been great and is injured going into this game. So they have a lot of question marks offensively. And I think the Seattle team, this is the best. And I said this at the beginning of the year. This Seattle team is one of the best teams that nobody really knows. They have great wide receivers, Lockett and Jigba, Metcalf, really good. Charbonnet and Walker running back. And Geno Smith has been more than serviceable. He's been top 10, 15. I think this game is prime for upset. I think this is like a 24. I wouldn't touch that over under, but I think it's like a 24-20 Seattle win here.
Again, just flying right under that underline, just 46.5. So don't want to touch that, but you do think
that's why the numbers are there.
Oh, they do a good job.
Yeah, they do. They know it.
Well, all right. I think that wraps it up for us. Anything else you have to add to that one?
No, I think these things happen in season, quarters. You'll see things flush out. People have a tendency to overreact to good play from week to week. But if you should look for the signs of really, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to really see any kind of trends develop in the NFL.